Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, dreaming of fatherhood. And we're still filming the movie Speedway. It's July or August 1967. Nancy Sinatra, Bill Bixby, Elvis are in production, and we're going to hear more about what happened on the set, not just from them, but from some other people, as well as learn a little bit more about this movie. Hi, Gunn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Going to get started with a song. And this song is about a telegram that he received from his friend Gary Pepper that Elvis really needed the moment that he received it, and he sent a letter back. This is Telegram from a Friend.
The lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars align. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace. From 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise, I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart, your voice was steady. A whisper soft, a faith unbowed. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings. Friendship wears no stage or wings.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear more echoes about dreaming of fatherhood and about the set and what was going on during the filming of Speedway. And one thing I thought we'd take a closer look at is we hear a lot about how Elvis's movies were done on the cheap and how there wasn't much money involved and therefore the production value was low, and that's why he couldn't have quality movies. So I thought we'd compare the budget of this film, Speedway, to just two other movies that were filmed pretty much at the same time. One was about a year before, but it has significance to this year. And one was not quite a full year before, but it also has significance to this year. Because basically these two movies would kind of help determine what a budget for a movie in 1967 was going to be. So the budget for Speedway, depending on what sources you go to, is somewhere between $1.5 million and $3 million. Of that amount, Elvis was paid $850,000. So he's roughly between one half and a third of what it costs to make the movie. And then you wonder, well, even if Elvis is worth a half or a third of the movie, how much do people actually spend on movies back then? And Gunn says that she's so glad that we have the movies. I am too. And I don't think that they're low quality movies. I think they have one particular flaw, which is the writing. And I think it all comes down to the writing, and that for whatever reason, they just had poor writers on these movies. And I don't really know who the writers are or anything about them, so maybe I should track them through all the movies so that I can actually, stand behind this statement. But we're going to look at some of the other pieces of the movie and see, is this where the movie fell apart? Was it on the budget? Did they just not have enough money? And Gunn says that most of them were entertaining. And I agree. I think they were entertaining. So let's compare Speedway to another movie that was filmed that year or right before it. One that we actually saw we didn't see the movie, but we saw the trailer in a previous episode. So if you missed that episode, be sure to go back into the archive and check it out. But it's the movie Casino Royale that starred Peter Sellers, among many others. And it's a spoof of a James Bond movie. Now, this surprised me. This had a very large budget for the time. It was one of the premier movies of its day. And it was like the second or third most expensive movie to make. Probably, they would say it's 1967 because that's when it came out, but they probably did most of the filming in 66. And it cost $12 million. So Elvis's movie cost $2 to $3 million, and Casino Royale cost another $10 million. And then another film that was out that year was The Graduate, which has Dustin Hoffman in it. It's a well-known film. It had a budget of $3 million. So The Graduate basically had the same budget as Elvis's movie Speedway. Now, we could probably assume that the total budget for the actors in The Graduate probably was less than the 850,000 that Elvis got for the move for Speedway. So they probably had some dollars more for production, but I'm not sure it shows up in that film. I don't know. I can't remember anything in that film that looked really expensive. But it was the highest grossing film of 1967. So for the $3 million that they put into it, they pulled in more money than any other film in 1967. So Elvis had not only the opportunity to pull in more money than any other movie, but to win accolades and awards just like The Graduate did. There's really no difference in between their movies as far as budget goes. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. It's 3:10 p.m. here in Georgia, in the United States. And Gunn says that she admits some of the scenes in the movies were crazy, but she took it for Elvis enjoying himself, or for us to be able to enjoy Elvis. Yes, they were very entertaining. I definitely agree. And I think that if Elvis had wanted to, and he had pushed the issue, I mean, there's no reason it couldn't have been at the same level or even greater than The Graduate. Now, maybe there was a lack, of talent on the movie other than Elvis. But we know that Nancy Sinatra's on it. And we did hear one critic say she's not a very good actress, but I think we would all say that she's not really bad. Like, we don't have any problem with Nancy's acting. I don't think any of us would. She's entertaining on the screen. She's very sincere with Elvis, so that comes across. And then there's Bill Bixby. I think we'd all agree that Bill Bixby, great actor, and he has a long resume of great acting. And Gunn says that one can't compare movies where people sing several minutes from the story. I think that again depends on the writing and the songs. I think if you were to marry the songs and the writing appropriately, and there's been very, very few examples of this in film history, but this was Elvis. So I think he could have carried off a dramatic role in which there was singing in the movie because it was Elvis, but that's just my opinion. I think things could have been crafted for him. I think the writing in a lot of these movies was sloppy. And it's the same problem I have with a lot of entertainment, but especially today. And I always think of and of course his name escapes me at the moment that I need him. But he's the man that made the movie Spaceballs. And he made several other funny movies like Robin Hood Men in Tights and things like that. But his motto was never to go ask for the money to make a movie until you had the entire script written. And I've always remembered that, to always have your script written first. He says there's plenty of time to get the script in shape until you ask for the money. And then you're under the gun. And that means you'll never have a good idea for that script. And it will show when you go to make the movie. And I think that the scripts on these movies were insufficient. And Gunn says, but the acting is longer in movies without music. That's true. That's true. So it would have, stretched his acting abilities a little bit more. And it would have been fun to see him, I think, in some where he did do some where there was no singing or there was very little. But I would have liked to see him do some when he was older, with no singing like that. Like in his 40s. That would have been really fun, I think. But maybe, we've got these three people that we know are talented in this movie. Maybe they lacked on the talent somewhere else. Maybe it's in the director, but we know that the director on this movie, even though Alana Nash didn't like him, Norman Torog, he'd done several other successful Elvis movies, including Blue Hawaii, the biggest grossing Elvis movie of all. So it's not in the director. And the producer on this is a guy named Douglas Lawrence. And he's going to produce the Elvis movie Stay Away Joe, as well as Live a Little, Love a Little. But he's experienced. He knows what he's doing because he also produced Judy Garland's first album from Capitol Records in 1955. So the man's been in business for a while. He knows how to get production on either audio or films done now. And I actually have a picture of him that we can see. He's standing right behind Elvis and Nancy Sinatra. In this picture, he's wearing like a checked jacket and a skinny tie. He's got a smile on his face. And he's looking down at Nancy and Elvis, who are sitting. And Luann says that she thinks the whole show has to make it colorful for the Elvis image, for Elvis to stand out and his name to stand out at the movie's first star, Elvis Presley, because that's what always attracted Luann's attention. That's interesting. They are definitely vehicles that are crafted for Elvis, but I think they could be crafted much better. I think maybe one of the issues was that I don't know that Elvis was actually interested in the writing. Like, I don't know that he ever went and sat down with the writers and said, I sure would like to do a movie that was like this instead, or I could say some of these things, but I don't know. I mean, he talked to everybody else, so it seems like he would have. But then again, the writing's done at a stage long before Elvis shows up to film. So it's possible he never even meets these people who write, depending on exactly how they're running the system. Sometimes the writers come to the set and they do rewrites and stuff, but sometimes they've hired other writers to come to the set and do the rewrites. And Gunn says that she thinks they were in a hurry making Elvis movies and didn't have the time to do the good scripts. So that's interesting, but on this one, we have definitely seen that the script was purchased from another studio, so it had already been written. It was written for somebody else. And then it was modified, but it's been in production, or it's been in existence since 1966. So it's been out there a long time. And did they make this movie as a quickie? Well, we know now that we've done the timeline. They started filming the last week of June, and they're going to finish in August, like August 19th. So it's like a 7 or an 8 week shoot, plus a week of pre-production. I think that's pretty much equal to what most other films were doing at the time. Now, there had been a movie, Scarum Harem, and it was filmed really, really quick. And I think maybe there'd been one other one. And they were done, I think, in less than 4 weeks, something like that. So, but then they've grown into this myth that all the movies were done like that. But as we can see in this one, Now, in Clam Bake, if we think back to it, it did have a compressed film time, but that was because Elvis had that concussion. And they basically did 4 weeks in April, and they did the last week of March, so that was like 5 weeks altogether. But they had planned to do at least 6. So that, I think, was even a little less than this one. But still somewhat reasonable. So I'm not positive it was in the time either. We've got this guy we can see on screen. He's got a good resume. So it's probably not in the production end itself because he's the producer. Now, Bill Bixby, he says, Elvis tried. Well, let me start over here. Bill Bixby said, if Elvis tried to get out of anything by himself, that people can be cruel. Not that they wish to be, but that they would be so excited about meeting him. So Bill's talking about if Elvis like walked off of this set and there was a bunch of fans there and suddenly they surrounded him, if he just tried to walk away from them, that they would be so excited about meeting him that they wouldn't realize that their actions could possibly harm him. But Bill goes on and says, if Elvis were to stop them from taking more of his time because he had to get somewhere, the minute he would try to pull away, people would go from love to hate. How dare you do that to me? So he had to be surrounded and isolated. So Bill's not naming a specific incident, but it seems like he's witnessed people come up to Elvis and engage him in conversation. And Elvis needs to go elsewhere because he's got duties. And then one of the guys has to come and intervene, or multiple of the guys. And they'll have to come and say, Mr. Presley, you're needed on set, or we've got to escort you over to get your makeup, or whatever it is that they've got to say, and then escort the other people away. But if he just tries to walk away, then people feel like he's insulted them, like he's too big to talk to them, and then they become angry about it. The producer that we were just looking at, he also produced this movie, which had James Garner in it, and he'd done it the year before. And you can see his name down at the very bottom. It says Douglas Lawrence. And apparently the plot of this movie, which I've never seen, it's titled Mr. Budwing. He wakes up in a suit in Central Park in New York City, but he doesn't know who he is. And it's James Garner, who most people know from the Rockford Files. Or he was, before that, in a TV Western, he was Maverick. And then, of course, he's famous from movies before that. And then in this picture, we can see two ladies. One is named Piper Laurie. I believe she's on the left. And on the right is Gene Simmons. And I really don't know anything about these two lovely ladies. But the man in the middle with the award, which is, I believe, an Oscar, which is an award for film, that's Joseph Ruttenberg. And this is at an event for the movie Somebody Up There Likes Me in 1956. So about 11 years before the events of Speedway. And this Speedway is the very last film that Joseph Ruttenberg films. He's the cinematographer, the man that's actually in charge of the cameras, of capturing the images on the film. And this is the end of his award-winning career. He also filmed the movie It Happened at the World's Fair. So he's worked with Elvis before. And he's been, not only has he won awards, he was nominated for an Oscar 10 times. So he didn't win 10 times, but he got nominated. So the issue with Speedway, if there is an issue, it's not cinematography. It's not direction. It's not production. It's not the budget. They could have used more money, but it's not the budget. It's not necessarily the time. It seems like they had adequate time. And Bill Bixby says that Elvis had to be surrounded and isolated. Otherwise, I don't think he would have had any kind of a normal life. Now, you may recognize this man on screen. His name is Gale Gordon, and he plays the IRS agent R.W. Hepworth in this movie Speedway. And he's known for playing stuffy characters. But you may recognize him from TV series such as Dennis the Menace, where he played Mr. Wilson. And he played on at least 3 Lucille Ball television shows. The Lucy's Show, the Lucille Ball Comedy Hour, and Here's Lucy. He also was in a whole bunch of other stuff. So there's a good chance you already recognize this man. But he's in this movie as well. And Luann says that she recognizes him from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. The man we see on screen, he's also in the movie Speedway. And he plays Abel Esterlake. And he's played hundreds of roles in film and TV, including the father on the television show The Patty Duke Show. When people used to ask him, what are you most famous for? He would say, a Star Trek original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you'll recognize William Schallert as well. He was in a lot of TV stuff. And William says, Elvis was a sweet guy who called me sir when we talked. I kept wanting to say to him, hey buddy, you're the star. I'm just me. So that's what William remembers, that Elvis was very polite to him and he always called him sir. And that William understood that he was on this movie because Elvis was a star. He was able to get movies like this greenlit and the budgets running. And William's at work because Elvis is famous and he's a star. And so it's William who wants to thank Elvis and show him the respect. This lady is also in the movie. Luann says that, yeah, she knows William from the Patty Duke show as her dad. I feel like he was on Gidget, too. Like, I thought he was the dad on Gidget, but I might have that wrong. And Gunn says, wasn't he the father in Speedway, too? Yes, he's this father of the younger, yes, in Speedway. And that's why we're showing him here. And this lady, her name is Charlotte Stewart, and she plays Lori. And in the 1970s, you may recognize her more from the 1970s because she was the much beloved teacher in the town of Walnut Grove on the TV series Little House on the Prairie. She was Ms. Beadle, or Miss Beadle, I think they called her. She had her hair a little different. She was a little older. But if you ever watched Little House on the Prairie, I'm sure you saw her. Now, the little lady in this picture who's looking so adoringly at Elvis, this is Victoria Paige Meyerink. And she played Ellie Esterlake. So William would have played her father. And she's playing the little sister. Or she has a little sister. So even though she's little, there's another little girl in this movie. And I don't have a picture of that girl. But she's the granddaughter of Norman Taurog, the movie director. So the girl we see on screen, there's another girl I don't have a picture of who's even younger that just happens to be the granddaughter of the director, which I thought was a cute fact. But this young lady is Victoria Paige Meyerink. And Luann says that she saw Miss Beadle on Little House on the Prairie that she watches on weeknights. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So, Victoria, she says that when I was cast as Ellie Easterlake in Speedway, I knew the project was special and that it would be a great experience. Now, when Victoria says this, of course, she's a grown-up, but she's saying that she knew at this age that we see her right there, that when she heard she was going to be in this movie with Elvis, that she knew it was going to be a great experience. And Victoria goes on to say, I had no idea that from that moment on, Elvis Presley would become a huge part of my life and career forever. And Pat says that she remembers Gail Gordon from The Lucy Show. Victoria's told us that this role, this moment where we can see her right there looking up at Elvis, that this moment echoes throughout the rest of her life for her entire life and career. It's very powerful. And she says, they cast me without even auditioning. And I recall the first time I met Elvis was at a rehearsal for our number, Your Time Hasn't Come Yet, Baby, on an MGM soundstage. Of course, I knew of Elvis. I was excited about meeting him and that we'd be working together for weeks. I had already worked with huge celebrities like Danny Kaye. Now, we know Danny Kaye because he flew Elvis to get married on May 1st, just a few months before this. And this young lady has worked with him. But she says, I had already worked with huge celebrities like Danny Kaye, Rock Hudson, and Clint Walker, and considered Elvis a fellow actor and professional. We were there to make a movie together. So when we were introduced, a very formal, almost 7-year-old extended her hand and said, "Hello, Mr. Presley." And he replied, "Hello, Victoria. This is gonna be fun." And that's how 6-year-old Victoria met Elvis Presley. Now, later in her life, Victoria, like she said, this story follows her throughout her life and she tells it. And this is a picture of her at a much later stage when she was still telling the story. Now, I don't really know where she's at today or what's going on with her. But wherever she's at, she must still be telling this story. So if you know anything about Victoria, if you're a fan of hers and have kept up with her, let us know. And she says, Elvis and I were, oh, let's take a look at this. We got another picture right here. So this is actually not part of the movie. They are filming the movie, but they're doing something with the cameras or the lights or something. And these two, Elvis and Victoria, they're waiting to be able to perform their scene. And this is what she says about this moment in time, this behind the scenes moment. She says, Elvis and I were discussing how we thought the snack that props made for the scene should have been made of graham crackers and peanut butter. So you can see there's a table in the scene and it's got a plate and some milk and or what appears to be milk in the glass. Obviously they had to eat something during this scene, and they're both agreeing that it should have been graham crackers and peanut butter. I'm not sure what props provided, but 6-year-old Victoria, she felt like it should have been graham crackers with some peanut butter. And Elvis, he said yes. I agree. Now, in this movie Speedway, there are champion professional NASCAR drivers who play themselves. And that includes this man, Richard Petty, one of the most famous NASCAR drivers. And we have Buddy Baker. And I'm not really a NASCAR guy, so other than Richard Petty, I don't really recognize any of the rest of these names or their pictures. But people who are into NASCAR, I'm sure you do. So if you're watching this show, let us know what you think about these individuals having been in this movie with Elvis Presley, but it's the cream of the crop of the NASCAR community. So again, the amount of talent that is connected to this movie is staggering. And this is Cale Yarborough. This is Tiny Lund. And so his nickname is Tiny, I guess. This is Dick Hutcherson. He's in the movie Speedway. G.C. Spencer. And this driver is Roy Main. So these were all the top of their profession, and they were all in this movie about stock cars, stock car racing with Elvis Presley. Now, I don't know that any of them ever met Elvis. I'd have to go back and watch this movie and figure out where these scenes are. I do know that they went and filmed on location in Charlotte, North Carolina. Elvis wasn't at those location shots. But some of these drivers might have been. And Victoria, the little girl, she says, even though Elvis did ask me over lunch who I would marry, him or Bill Bixby, I didn't know Elvis as an adult. I love that I had the privilege of knowing Elvis when I was just 7 years old. I gained a unique perspective, different from all his other co-stars over the years. So she recognizes that her experiences with Elvis are unlike anybody else's because of their age difference and the fact she was a child at the time. And Victoria says, it was during filming that I remember a particular special day. Elvis and the assistant directors, they gathered the whole cast and crew together on set for an important announcement. Now, Victoria is about to tell us a story that we've already heard and that we already know, but she's going to tell us how it was from her viewpoint as a 6 or 7-year-old little girl on the set. She was there when Elvis came out, and she says Elvis was beaming. I remember the anticipation of what he would say. And he stood up on a couple of apple boxes, and he shared with us all the news that Priscilla was expecting. His famous smile and the glint in his eyes expressed such happiness. Everyone applauded and yelped, "Congratulations!" Then Elvis looked over at me among the crowd. He pointed and he said, I want a little girl just like you. It was an unbelievably happy moment. I ran over and I hugged him. And so that's the way that Victoria remembers when Elvis announced to everyone that he was going to be a father and that Priscilla was pregnant. And in that moment, he said, I want a little girl. And he said that it was just like her. And then in one of the books, well, several of the books, there seems to be a consensus, although I can't find anybody that's actually being quoted saying it, But there's talk around what I'm about to say. And it's that Elvis appeared to lose sexual interest in Priscilla while she was pregnant. So, any of you that have ever read her book or know much about what's in it, that's usually one of the pieces that gets talked about. That Elvis seemed to lose physical interest in Priscilla at some point, and some people link it to the fact that she was pregnant. And Priscilla herself says, I guess Elvis had a Madonna complex. Now, a Madonna complex is, and this is coming from a woman who is Catholic, or was brought up in a Catholic upbringing at least. She went to a Catholic school. That's where she went in Memphis. She graduated from a Catholic high school. So she attended a lot of Catholic services. And the Madonna is, it's particularly a special Catholic idea. It may be in other forms of Christianity too, but it's very particular to the Catholics. So when she says Madonna complex, I think she's saying that Elvis revered his mother, and he extends that reverence to all mothers. And she was saying it in reference to this loss of sexual interest, like somebody had asked her in a coded way about this. And she's responding in this coded way that seems to indicate that he wouldn't have had a physical interest in a pregnant woman, or more generally, a mother. And we've seen that myth as well put out there. And Gunn says that it's a lovely story about Elvis and Victoria, that Elvis always had a smile on his face when he was with a child in the pictures. That's an interesting observation and kind of true. I think it probably is true. And Pat says she thinks Dale Earnhardt was famous also. And that's Buddy Baker. Yep. And that the names of the drivers are on the door. Yeah, they like to personalize their machines. And Joe Esposito, he says that Elvis just didn't feel comfortable doing that. And so somebody's asked Joe a similar question about Elvis being with a woman who'd had children or a woman who was pregnant. I think to Joe, it was a woman who had had children. And Joe is saying Elvis just didn't feel comfortable doing that. Sometimes if I met somebody I was going to introduce to him, I would tell her, don't say you have a kid. There were a couple of other girls he dated who were mothers, but he never knew it. In other words, they weren't big affairs, just small events. So Joe seems to support this theory that Elvis had an issue with women who were mothers or about to be. And Gunn says that he did have relationships with other women who were mothers. And Joe's telling us that he didn't know. He didn't know they were mothers. Now, I think he did have relationships with women who were mothers, and he knew it. So I don't think that's a completely accurate statement from Joe. When Priscilla says, I guess that he had a Madonna complex, well, she's guessing, so she doesn't really know. if Elvis had a Madonna complex. So both of these statements are statements of perspective and opinion. We've got to give them some weight because they were there for the events, but they're not really telling us any facts of the moments. And some of the statements they're making don't line up with real facts. But somebody apparently asked Priscilla again, or they followed up at some point. And what she said was, no, of course we were having sex. I mean, he was Elvis after all. And I must say, he was very creative, very playful. So I'm not sure why Priscilla ever said that Elvis had a Madonna complex. But I think that it helped fuel these statements by other people like Joe, who's indicating that Elvis didn't like to hang out with women who had kids, which may just have been part of what he was looking for in a woman. Is he may have been looking for someone who did not have kids or who had not already been married. I'm not saying that that's what he should have been looking for, but I mean, I'm sure he had certain ideas in mind. And that doesn't necessarily mean he had any kind of hang-ups about it. Could have just been preferences. Joe felt he had a preference not to hang out with somebody that had kids, or not to turn that into a relationship. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what Joe is saying. But Priscilla's saying that whatever's being said about them not having physical interactions together, that none of that's true. And that was always happening. And that those rumors are not true. And Gunn says, or maybe Joe meant that Elvis didn't want to get involved with women and children, a bit complicated with ex-fathers and so on. Exactly, Gunn, exactly. There's a lot of complications that come with it, and Elvis did have a wide selection of people that he could select from, right? He had a large pool of ladies who would like to spend their time with him. So he could be very selective if he wished to. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what people are trying to say that it does. And Pat says that Elvis was so excited to be a father. Yes, he was. He definitely was. And William Schallert, let's let him get in and say something. The dad from Patty Duke, and who's also the father in this movie, Speedway, he says Elvis was just a really nice guy. The people around him were all his buddies who had been with him for ages. It was a very warm atmosphere for him. They were nice guys. It was a pleasure working with Elvis. So William really enjoyed his time with Elvis. And from the outside looking in, it doesn't sound like William would have said anything like Bill Bixby said when he described that he was part of Elvis's group. Doesn't look like William would have felt he was part of Elvis's group, but he really liked working with Elvis. And from the outside, he saw that the group provided a lot of warmth and love for Elvis, and that he could feel that himself as a guest of the group. And so he didn't see these fractures that we're seeing, that we know exist within the group at this moment. But to the external world, they really do appear to be a tight-knit family loving, warm group. And Victoria, the little girl, she says that Elvis seemed to prefer hanging out with me on the set and lunching together, and it was flattering. I got the impression he really enjoyed being a big kid, making my little books with me, playing cards between scenes and rehearsals, and feeding the tiny kitten in my trailer. I had sneaked the cat in onto the set in a shoebox. Anyone could tell that Elvis would be a terrific father. He exuded such warmth and joy. And Pat says that it could be that Priscilla had feelings for someone else, and that Elvis sensed that, therefore he lost interest in physical relations with Priscilla. And we have seen that the group seems to indicate that Priscilla had something for Jerry. And we've seen that Jerry has decided he's not going to stick around after this movie. He's going to go ahead and stay in Hollywood and try to be a film editor. Basically, he's removing himself from Graceland or the immediate vicinity of Elvis or the immediate vicinity of Priscilla, depending on how you look at it. But for whatever reason, Jerry and his new wife, they're not going to be with the gang anymore. But a child who spends some time with Elvis on set, as an adult, looks back and says, it was obvious that Elvis was going to be a great father. That's the experience I had with him, that he was a great father, or he had the potential for that. And Pat says that NASCAR is not the same as the old stock racing, in her opinion. And this is where we're going to leave it for today. We've almost finished up completely with Speedway. And it turns out that there's not going to be a return to Circle G at this time. Because by the time this movie ends, it's time to make the next movie, which is Stay Away Joe. And so we're going to hop directly from Speedway into Stay Away Joe. He's only got like 2 days off in between them. And I haven't mapped it out yet, but I'm guessing that's a weekend. And then it's going to be back to work for Elvis. So he's a busy man in 1967. And we're going to catch back up with him in the next episode. But for now, I'm going to leave you all with a song. And that's going to be Threads and Dreams. And until I see you guys all again, you all keep on taking care of business. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
He wore a yellow shirt, black pants in the sun, rode horses through silence, then golf carts for fun. A ranch just 10 miles from the mansion's bright gate, where the myth met the morning and time learned to wait. George fixed the brickwork, the pipes in the ground, lit VP on shirt where no spotlight was found. Donna kept diaries, snapshots ahead of a father who labored, of a myth made by man. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a crown, just a place to be still when the world spun around. In the hands of the quiet, in the stitch of a scene, He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a crown, just a place singing still, decoration out in a hang out the fight. The mistakes on the sea, we drained the weight of the hearts and his teeth. Snowstorms in March to fairgrounds at night. He chased peace in motion and shadow and light. And Priscilla saw him silhouette aglow, breathing in twilight, steady and slow. He didn't ask for gold.